we've got injections, we've got infusions, we've even got some oral medications. But now we've got something new. Well, hello and welcome to You and Me, Multiple Sclerosis. My name is Pam and I've been living with multiple sclerosis for over 39 years. And as someone who's got secondary progressive multiple sclerosis, I'm particularly interested in new therapies that target secondary progressive MS, especially non-active secondary progressive MS, which is, I think, what they would consider me to have, in the sense that I have no new relapse activity, no new symptoms, just very slow worsening of my existing symptoms, and occasional recurrence of some symptoms that I've had before. So they consider that progression independent of relapse activity, or PIRA, and I've been living with that one for quite a long time. There's not very much that's available for someone like me, especially at my age, because I'm 64. A lot of clinical trials don't even extend to people my age. So I was very interested to see this article from Multiple Sclerosis News Today that talks about a new therapy, this time a nasal spray, and it is specific to non-active secondary progressive MS. We better take a look at that. I don't know when you're watching this, of course, but it was posted on April 24th, 2024, which was only a few days ago from the time that I'm recording this video. I did go out to the internet to see if this story was being reported more widely, and it certainly is. This has actually been making quite a splash, both in the medical community and in the finance community, as the investor types are getting pretty excited about it. Foralumab found to ease fatigue in secondary progressive MS patients in ACCESS program. Use of nasal spray reduced levels after 6 months in 7 out of 10 patients in EAP, and I think that means early access program. So it is a monoclonal antibody similar to some of the other ones that we take, like ocrelizumab. But this one is a nasal spray. So talk about ease of use. For people like me who started with those injectables, and with Copaxone at the time, I had to have an injection every single day. So nasal spray, that sounds really good. And the statistics on success sound also really good. The article goes on to say fully 70% of patients with non-active secondary progressive multiple sclerosis who received Foralumab nasal spray in an expanded access program experienced a lessening in fatigue levels after 6 months of treatment. So the E stands for expanded, not early. But I think you'll see why I was confused as we get further into the article. That's according to early findings from the EAP, a program that enables patients with serious or life-threatening conditions to have access to an experimental therapy outside of clinical trials, as reported by Tiziana Life Sciences, Foralumab's developer. And so now you see why I thought E stood for early, because even though the drug is not really readily available on the open market, through this EAP program, we are able to get access to it, which is really cool. I actually never knew you could do that with anything for multiple sclerosis. So another point in the success column for Foralumab. This EAP enrolled 10 non-active SPMS patients who had previously seen their symptoms progress while on treatment with Ocrevus or ocrelizumab. 7 of them experienced reductions in fatigue after using Foralumab for 6 months per Tiziana. In addition to the easing of fatigue, patients also experienced a stabilization or improvement in other clinical measures after transitioning to the multiple sclerosis therapy candidate, the data showed. the clinically meaningful improvement in fatigue levels seen in 7 out of 10 patients, as well as the stabilization or improvements in other key outcome measures that were seen in all patients, underscores the potential of Tiziana's investigational therapy to address this critical unmet need. Gabriele Cerrone, chairman and acting CEO and founder of Tiziana, said in a company press release. Foralumab is now being tested in a new phase 2 clinical trial for non-active SPMS. Based on early findings from the EAP, Tiziana late last year launched a clinical trial to test the nasal spray in SPMS patients in a randomized controlled setting. The main goal is to assess changes in the activity of microglia, or brain-resident immune cells known to contribute to MS progression. But researchers also will monitor changes in quality of life and fatigue. That phase 2 trial, and there's the number, and in a minute we'll click on that. I wanted to show you a couple of things there. And it's already recruiting participants at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, with additional sites expected to open soon, according to another press release from the company. Yeah, I'm going to be keeping an eye on that. This Brigham and Women's Hospital is in the Boston area, and as you'll see later, scientists from Harvard, among other institutions, have been involved in the research. A total of 54 patients with non-active SPMS will be randomly assigned to receive either a 50 or 100 microgram dose of Foralumab or the placebo for about 3 months. Meanwhile, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has allowed the company to expand its EAP from 10 participants to a total of 30, meaning that patients who are ineligible for the trial might be able to receive the medication in this compassionate use program. As I will show you later, I would not be qualified for this trial based on a couple of factors as I went through the eligibility criteria, and I'll show you that here in a minute. Non-active SPMS is a type of multiple sclerosis in which disability worsens gradually in the absence of relapses or new inflammatory lesions in the brain or spinal cord. So that's what I was talking about before, that progression independent of relapse activity. Fatigue is a debilitating symptom experienced by about 80% of the people with MS. So we know that, we know it very well. And Foralumab is an antibody-based therapy designed to reduce MS-driving inflammation by targeting the CD3 protein at the surface of immune T cells. That's expected to reduce the activity of inflammatory T cells while boosting the activation of regulatory T cells that help control excess inflammation. And this is kind of the neat news to me. All 10 patients in the EAP were stabilized or improved in key clinical measures. And we've already talked about that, but here they say that the ongoing EAP originally was to test the intranasal therapy in 10 individuals receiving it as part of a single patient access program. Another 8 were to receive the treatment by an intermediate-sized EAP. Participants are receiving a 50 microgram dose of Foralumab sprayed into each nostril in cycles of 3 weeks. In all, treatment is given 3 times weekly for 2 weeks, followed by a week of pause. After 6 months of treatment, the results have shown that the therapy is generally safe, with no patients experiencing any serious side effects. Well, how often is that going to be the case? 4 patients experienced so-called improvements in their disability levels, meaning they had a reduction in their expanded disability status scale scores or an easing of symptoms. While another 4 saw actual improvements in their walking ability as measured with a timed 25-foot walk. And the remaining patients had stable scores on these measures. So there was no improvement, but there was no continued progression. And then they talk about how fatigue was measured and that there were measurable reductions in people's fatigue. And they say all 10 Foralumab-treated patients stabilized or improved in key clinical measures, and 7 showed clinically meaningful improvement in their fatigue at 6 months. said Tanuja Chitnis, MD, a professor of neurology at Harvard Medical School and a neurologist at Brigham and Women's Hospital. Chitnis also noted that this patient population had a disease state that typically shows a decline in function over time, and that all had previously clinically progressed on ocrelizumab. I am pleased to see the continued clinical response to intranasal foralumab for patients enrolled in our expanded access non-active SPMS program, Chitnis noted. Well, why don't we go out then and we'll take a look at that clinical trial. As I said, not the whole thing, but there's a couple pieces I want to show you. And if you click on the link in that article, this is the page that you go to from the clinicaltrials.gov website. Here's the study, a study of nasal foralumab in non-active secondary progressive multiple sclerosis patients. And as I said, we're just going to scroll down to a couple of different parts here that I just wanted to show you. The contacts and locations, so far, as they said, it's only going to be in the one location in the United States, Boston, Massachusetts. But if you happen to live in that area, you might want to contact these folks. The study contact is Matthew Davis, and there's his phone number and his email address. And you may also want to keep an eye on this, as I plan to, and just see if other institutions join in with recruiting for the clinical trial. I, of course, am hoping to see OHSU on the list because they're the ones I go to anyway for all my neurology, so it would be really nice if they would get involved in this study. I might suggest that to them. The other thing I wanted to look at with you is this participation criteria. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but I was going through it myself just to see if theoretically I would be eligible. I was very happy to see the age goes up to 75, which is nice because not all clinical trials recruit for people who are that advanced in years, because I'm thinking perhaps they're concerned that at that point we're probably going to have significant comorbidities and we're just more likely to die. I guess the actuarial tables would say we're more likely to die. They don't want us doing that before the trial is over. But these folks, they were okay with that, and I do appreciate that. Here's the one that would keep me from becoming part of the study. Number 6, have failed standard of care treatment with disease-modifying therapies for at least 2 years with continued accumulation of disability as evaluated by treating neurologists. Now, see, I haven't been on any therapy to fail or otherwise. Although I have stayed stable, I'm not on any disease-modifying therapy. I do occasionally take things for symptom management, but that's about it. So I think that they're really not looking for someone like me then. But if you fall into that category, then perhaps you would continue to be eligible for the study. You can see that there are quite a few eligibility criteria, and the exclusion criteria are also very important. As you can see here, number 5, you might want to check and be sure, because they say that one exclusion criterion is patients with any previous exposure to alemtuzumab, cyclophosphamide, cladribine, mitoxantrone, or daclizumab. And I don't know whether you've been on any of those or you've had any experience with them, or if you've had stem cell therapy, you would be also ineligible for this. The use of corticosteroids also seems to be a problem. Oh, and then number 11, yeah, this was the big one for me. Any history of malignancy or active malignancy. I'm assuming they're talking about cancer. I don't know how generalized that is, because my cancer was not in my brain. I even shouldn't say was, because it has recurred. I've mentioned that earlier. It has recurred, and I'm going to be dealing with that. But it looks to me like that would be a reason to disqualify me from this clinical trial anyway. But there are a whole bunch of exclusion criteria here. You might want to take a look at that. It's definitely one worth considering, though, if you meet the criteria and if you can get to the Boston area, or if you're patient and you can wait for other institutions to join in. And this interview was published just the day before I recorded this video. I like how they start with the top takeaways, because if you don't want to listen to the interview, here's the gist.
Yeah. So I'm a neurologist and a nuclear medicine physician, and my clinical practice is focused on multiple sclerosis. One of the common problems we see in our clinic is that often patients continue to get worse clinically, but there are no changes on their MRI. So in other words, we don't know what is the reason why patients are getting worse despite having no new lesions or relapses. So this phenomenon is actually called PIRA, or progression independent of relapse activity. And it is part of the entire spectrum of MS right from its beginning, but it becomes really more prominent in the non-active secondary progressive MS phase of the disease, where there are no new lesions, no relapses, but patients continue to get worse. So we have been using a technique called positron emission tomography, which is a molecular imaging technique that looks at hidden inflammation in the brain, basically looking at microglial activation, which is part of the innate immune system, which is resident in the brain itself and becomes activated in disease conditions. So in progressive MS, we and others have shown that there is increased microglial activation in the brain that we can pick up using this technique called PET imaging. So we use a particular tracer for PET called F18PBR06, which is a long half-life tracer which has high affinity to its target and basically reports on the glial density in the brain. Its target is called translocator protein, or TSPO, and it has been shown to be a marker of increased glial density. So mainly microglia, but also to some extent astrocytes. So we have shown, and others have also shown using other tracers, that in progressive MS it is increased. But there are no current approved treatments for this non-active secondary progressive MS. And what we have done in our study is that we have used a novel therapeutic. It's called nasal Foralumab. It's a fully human monoclonal antibody which targets CD3 molecule on T cells, and it is administered nasally. And in preclinical models, it has been shown to reduce the severity of progressive MS models. And also, it has been shown to decrease microglial activation and astrocytic activation, and has been neuroprotective. This is work done by Dr. Weiner in our group for the last decade in his lab. So we decided to ultimately translate it to humans, and we did a phase 1 study in healthy volunteers where we found the dose that was led by Dr. Chitnis in our group and Dr. Claire Beecher-Allen. And then subsequently we did an expanded access program for non-active secondary progressive MS patients, where we treated these patients with this nasal Foralumab. And in this paper, we are reporting our findings in the first 6 patients. And we saw that administration of this nasal Foralumab led to a significant reduction in the microglial PET signal at 3 months and 6 months, which is really remarkable from the standpoint of pathophysiology, because no other treatment has been shown so far to reduce this innate immune activation in this population. And this basically is a very encouraging result in terms of the potential of this therapeutic approach for treating patients with this non-active secondary progressive MS, because this is really an unmet need, because patients are getting worse despite being on highest efficacy disease-modifying treatment like the B-cell depleting therapies. So we believe this is encouraging, and obviously more work remains to be done. And we have started a phase 2 study as well. Since the submission of abstract, we have actually treated a total of 10 patients, and they are being followed, and many of them have actually shown stabilization in their clinical progression. They've also shown a decrease in their fatigue scores, which is very interesting. We have previously shown a relationship between microglial PET and fatigue. So the fact that microglial PET is decreased and the fatigue is decreased is also interesting. So in addition to these 10 patients, we will do an expanded access program. We'll build on this expanded access program and treat more patients in this expanded access program. But also, as I said, we have started a phase 2 study already. It's a multicentric trial, again led by Dr. Chitnis in our group, where PET imaging is actually a primary endpoint. PET imaging change at 3 months after starting nasal Foralumab is the primary endpoint in that phase 2.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty interested in this. And if I'm reading it correctly and I'm able to get this medicine, even though it really hasn't passed every stage of the clinical trial process, I'm going to be asking my neurologist about it. Because really, what do you have to lose? It seems like the side effects are very minimal, and it looks very effective. Everyone who was on it seemed to at least stay stable, but some even improved. So I'm willing to give it a try. I don't think I'll be seeing my neurologist for a while yet, so this will give them even more data to collect in the meantime. But if I do end up getting on it, I will definitely let you know. Do let me know, though, if you think that this would be something you'd be interested in. That would be great to know. So until I see you again in my next video, please do take really good care of yourself.